Welcome, everybody. Shalom.
Hey,
Another
Shabbat
week
shalom.
of the coffee break. What's up, Tom? How are you?
All good, man. All good. How are you?
Nice to have you here again.
Yeah, good to be
here.
here. You want to introduce our guests?
Yeah, we have two very special guys here with us today.
Yes. So we know them as Sam and Drew, but if you could just repeat your real names for the crowd.
Right. So my name is Samarth. Thank you so much for having us over on your podcast.
All right, Samarth, good to meet you.
And hi, I'm Dhruva.
Hi,
What's up?
Dhruva. How's it going?
So you guys. So first of all, would say you guys are exchange students, right?
Yeah.
Where I go to school
Yeah.
in Israel. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? Where are you from? How old are you? What do you do? What do you study? Stuff like that.
So I think I'll go first.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm from Bombay. I'm not grown up there my entire life. But yeah, it's within the state of Maharashtra in India. So yeah, India is this huge combination of several different states. So I mean, I'm assuming. I think Daniel, have you been to India?
I've only been there. I've passed there. Like I've been there for 24 hours. Or
Ah,
something
okay,
like
no.
that.
So that's
So I just
24 hours
landed.
is not
No,
enough.
not really. I was on my way to Nepal and I met a friend in India, so I stayed there. So I landed like in the morning. I've been to Delhi. I've walked around like all the main attraction, or not all, but some of the main attractions. And then the same night we flew to Nepal.
Okay.
But I've been to Nepal for a month, which it's of course different, but it's close, and I think there's some things that are pretty similar, no?
Yeah, Nepal is extremely similar. In fact, okay, sorry, we're deviating a lot, but just yesterday we went to this local shop out here which sells both Indian and Nepali food. So we got to know the shopkeeper. So he's been extremely kind to us every time we've gone there.
Nice.
So yeah, they give us this local Indian dish called momos. It's originally
Yeah, I know
from
it.
Nepal, yeah. So
Okay.
that's extremely popular throughout India. So we were extremely excited when we found that in the streets of Levinsky, in fact.
So wait,
Levinsky.
Drew, how did you guys end up? Well, tell us a bit about yourself, but also how did you guys end up coming to Israel?
Hi, I'm Dhruva here. I too am from Mumbai, and you must have noticed that Samarth calls Mumbai Bombay, and I call it Mumbai. We'll get into that in a while. My family is originally from southern India, and we moved there. And my parents have lived in different parts of India. We just came to Mumbai around 20 years ago, and I've lived all my life there. And we are studying design here in Holon. And back in India, we study a mixture of several kinds of design. It ranges from filmmaking, animation, and
Nice.
product.
That's very cool. For people that don't know, Holon, it's a city a bit south of Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
Yeah, very close. Part of the Tel Aviv metropolitan.
Yeah, and what's the name of your institute in Mumbai? Mumbai or Bombay? I don't know. Now I'm confused.
Yeah, how do we call it?
If I call it
And why is
Mumbai, then I'm in trouble with you. If I call it Bombay, then I'm in trouble with
And
you.
why is it two different names?
I think somewhere in 1999, there was this huge movement where several cities in India started to rename themselves as per their Indian traditions, because all these cities were named by the Britishers. So when Mumbai was a British colony, it was called Bombay. And so every place they're trying to re-identify with the Indian roots.
Yeah.
And so it became Mumbai, but it's still a controversial topic in India.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That's
I prefer
cool.
Bombay for some reason.
All right, fair enough.
Yes.
It's, I guess it's just a name. It doesn't really. I mean, obviously
A
names.
name is your identity. Right?
Yeah, names
I
have
think
a.
it's more than that, because when the way the names have been changed, it seems there's a lot of propaganda issues coming up with that. For example, you lose a lot about the history of the place. I can give you an example. There's this place called Chinspokli in Mumbai. So Chinspokli in Marathi would mean a grove of tamarind trees.
Okay.
Yes, but if you go there now, it's none of that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a very different place to look at. But there's something that the name tells you about the place, right?
Yes.
How it
yes,
used to be.
Definitely.
So Sam, how did you guys end up coming to Israel to study?
So I think each of us in our final year we get an opportunity to apply abroad for exchange. So each of us applied to several different universities. I think Israel was my third option. So
I
it
sense-
wasn't.
I'm sorry for cutting. I sense a trend here. It's
Yeah.
always because last week we had Tanya, his wife, and she also applied to different. And Israel, I believe, was the eighth
Israel was her eighth on the
option.
list.
So we're improving.
She was
a
like,
little bit.
"Oh, well, I ran out of South American places, so why not put Israel on there?"
I
Yeah,
want to bring someone who says, "Yeah, I always wanted to come here. This is my first option."
yeah. I always wanted to go to Israel because I heard about the conflict and it just ignited my mind. And no one ever says that.
I'm sorry. So
Alright.
it was your
Yeah.
third option.
I think third is slightly better than eighth, but
It's
either
better,
way,
yeah, for sure.
improving slowly.
Improving.
But yeah, so I think the options before Israel were Japan, and there was the university called Aalto University in Finland. So the reason I was going to apply to Finland was mainly because they had exactly the courses that I wanted to take.
Oh, wow.
But there were some problems there, so we couldn't apply there. And Japan, like the deadline for application just flew by, and I couldn't apply.
I have to be honest. I think it's good you didn't go to Finland. Not only because I love Israel, but if you've ever heard Finnish in your life, I would say it's the most difficult language anyone ever it's so misunderstood that you cannot understand when does a word end and when does it start, because it's very different from other European languages in the area. It's crazy.
Finnish, man.
Finnish, man.
God damn it. So and it was the same process for you as well.
No, so we were allowed to choose colleges based on our grades, and I had few options left. So Israel and Kenya.
Because you get bad grades.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was left with Israel and Kenya.
Kenya.
What?
Yeah.
We're on the same list with Kenya? Are we that bad?
No.
Dude, Kenya is a cool place. Why do you
Kenya's
like
a great place, but it's okay.
Yeah,
Never mind.
I don't think so. But,
All right.
But yeah, we had friends who had earlier been to Holon, and they mentioned that it's great to be here. My girlfriend had come to Bezalel and spent her exchange there.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And
Okay. It's also a design college.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the
basically.
oldest design
The
academy.
oldest,
Yeah, all of our professors are Bezalel graduates.
Oh,
coming
really?
here and teaching
Okay.
us.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
I didn't
from-
know where that.
I believe it was founded the early last century, the
Okay.
early 1900s.
Cool.
I think they celebrated a year, 100 years
Wow,
recently.
okay.
Just like a few years ago.
Okay.
It's insane. It's
My older brother studied in Jolon, by the way.
yeah,
Forgot to say that.
yeah. Industrial design, right?
Mhm.
So how is your impressions from Israel? You here for how long already?
We've been here 2.5 months,
Mhm.
and another 2.5 months left.
All right.
And how are your impressions from just I don't know. Also, I'm interested to hear about what you think about our institution as well. But maybe just first in general, from how are your impressions from Israel? Do you like it here? Is it like you imagined or?
Yeah, I mean, so far, okay, so maybe we'll start a little before we came here, because when we told people that we're going to Israel, we used to get handshakes and these really solemn faces that come back alive. Because I think there's this major misconception about the location of Israel being right next to Syria and the rest. So everyone thinks you're going to this really dangerous place. But once you arrive here, you realize that it's not that. And even the more you read on the internet, you know that it's super safe, especially places like Tel Aviv and Holon. But yeah, at least in India, I don't think anybody would really want to come here on vacation, or that's not part of the culture. So the way when we interacted with students from Germany and we heard from the US as well, people come here just on vacation. Like they love Tel Aviv as a city. Whereas back at home in India, I don't think anybody would really imagine that, oh, you're going to Israel on vacation. What is wrong with you? So there's a major misconception in
Which
that
is
case.
funny because Israelis go to vacation in India all of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we met so many people from Israel in India, and especially out here when we're roaming the streets. If anybody comes up to us and asks us, where are you from? And we say India, oh yeah, we've been to India. And we know exactly the route that they would take, like across Rishikesh, Manali and the rest.
Yeah.
There's something called the hummus track or the hummus route.
We call it the Ganja route.
The ganja route?
Yeah.
Is it the route that all the tourists take?
Yes. And
They all go there, smoke ganja, and then they're hungry, so they eat hummus. Right?
We call it the hummus route because hummus because Israel and stuff like that, but it's just like there's a certain trip that all Israelis take, and it's not just in India or in Asia. Southeast Asia. It's in South America as well. All the Israelis go to the same places, one after the other. So it's Manali,
Yeah, but
Kasol,
it's very common
Parvati
for
Valley, and all that
it's
area.
very common for Israelis when they finish their army to go travel abroad for, let's say, I think average is like 4, 5, 6 months. So they go either Southeast Asia or South America.
Or India. Some people just go to 6 months.
Just
to India.
just to India. That's also But India, it's such a huge country. Like there's so many misconceptions about it. It's insane. But I've seen a map. If anyone's interested, Google wrong world map, and you will find that actually the map that we all know from school or the atlas or something, it's so not representative to how things actually are. Like
I've heard once that the Britain, like the British island itself, always looks bigger on the map than it really is.
Yeah, it does. France also looks bigger. Africa looks much smaller. Greenland looks huge. South America looks a lot smaller, but it's giant. It's giant. You know, India also, it's a huge. So how does it work? You said India is 22 countries, right? States, let's say.
I think it's 29 states now,
29,
but
okay,
22
sorry.
was the number of languages that we have.
Wow.
Yeah, we have 22 different languages. So
22 different language. What language? So every area, okay, so let's say when you went to school, Sam, what language did you learn?
So since I grew up mainly in Maharashtra, so one thing about India is that you have Hindi as the major common language between most of the states. So at least in the major, so in the states that we grew up in, Hindi is one of the most important languages, but in school, we speak only English. So most of our sciences, maths, all of the major, subjects?
Yeah.
All of the major subjects are taught in English itself.
Okay.
Of course, it depends on schools as well. Some schools are completely local, so they'll run their entire education system on a local language. Like in my state, it would be Marathi, whereas in another state, it would be their local language. Wow. So it depends. It's a huge mix of different languages and different forms of education as well. But then again, why English is also so important for us is because when we won our independence from the British, the years prior to that, when a lot of the freedom fighters were coming together to rally for a certain cause, the only language that they really had to connect to each other with was English, because if they ever got educated, it would be in English considering the British government. And any other language beyond that would be beyond their recognition, because one would speak Bengali, another would speak Marathi, another would speak
think
Malayalam.
about it. India is such a huge land, you know, like it's like, imagine you trying to connect all of Europe, you know, or something like that. I mean, I don't know if it's exactly the same size, but it's
size,
huge.
probably not, but
no,
in
but
terms
like,
of diversity of culture, I would
exactly.
agree with that.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
extremely
I
diverse.
think India is more diverse than
also
the
how
different
many
countries
Drew,
in
how many
Europe.
people live in India?
Probably 1.3 billion.
Wow, 1.3
Yeah, Mumbai's
million.
population I think is a little more than Israel.
Oh my God, that is crazy.
Probably a lot more, no? Because
How many people live there?
I think 12 million.
12 million,
Yeah,
like
we're
Greater
8.9
London.
in
Like Greater
Israel.
London.
Oh yeah.
Israel is
Israel's 8.9.
8.9. Yeah. Yeah.
So, man, I thought we make a lot of babies. Holy crap.
I think my impression, my biggest impression from the time I spent in India was how busy it is. Like the streets, you sense the amount of people. It's like you obviously can't see 1.3 billion people around you, or even I don't know how many people are in Delhi. I was in Delhi. Do you know the main bazaar area in Delhi?
Connaught Place?
Sorry?
Connaught Place, maybe. I've not really spent time in Delhi, but if you're talking about a main street or a main area in Delhi, I guess it would be Connaught Place.
No, it's a place called Main Bazaar, and it's like it's one of the worst areas in town. Like it's not a good area, but all the travelers go there because there's cheap hostels there, and it's kind of central, right? So, but but if you just go around that street, which is sort of a market, but also the streets around, well, some streets are just normal streets, right? But the main street, they're so busy. There's like rickshaws everywhere and motorcycles and cars, and they're all over each other. And
A
it's
lot of
one
animals
big
as well.
Animals, yeah, dogs, and.
But also, India is evolving like very, very fast, very
course, of course,
rapidly.
of course.
What's the name of your? Is he president or prime minister or?
Modi?
Yeah.
Narendra
Yeah.
Modi, yeah.
He's. I mean,
The
we
Prime
only know
Minister.
him because he came to visit here. Like we don't get a lot of India in the news.
He's a friend of Bibi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of India in the news. You know,
I'm guessing it
generally
must have
speaking.
built up now because I think this is really the first time that they've built up relations with Israel. Prior to this, I think the governments weren't really directly in support of Israel before.
Yeah.
So the relationships between the two countries have definitely improved. I mean, we sense that even so. I think as some context before I say this, we went to Hebron recently. Is that how you say it, or Hebron?
Hebron.
Hebron.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's okay.
close enough.
It's a Palestinian city with
so
an Israeli settlement. Okay.
yeah, it's in the West Bank, and out there the soldiers were extremely sweet to us. I mean, they didn't even check our passport. They just literally asked us, "Where are you from?" when they stopped us, and we just said we're from India, and they said, "Oh, okay, cool, you can go."
Oh, nice. I didn't know you get like preferred treatment if you're Indian in Israel.
There's a large Muslim population in India. Right?
Yes, I think it's probably the third largest in the world.
Third largest
Wow.
in the world.
Okay. But
It's
the majority of India, they are Hindu?
Yeah,
Okay.
mostly Hindu.
Hindu it's a religion,
I do not know that.
or is it a
I
nationality?
think it was more a way of life than a religion.
Okay.
But I think when past people came over to India, say the Britishers, or before that there were Persians, whom we call Mughals in India. I think the only way they could understand the culture was through their own framework, and the framework they had was Christianity or Islam.
Okay.
And I think through that framework, yes, it would be a religion. But once you spend time with Hinduism, you realize it's not one religion, it's a way of life. The thing is, like, what seems to connect most of India is each area has a separate god, or each one has their own local deities that they pray to. But the way they go about their daily life somehow unites them. In spite of these 29 different states and 22 different languages, I think this is one of the common factors we all have, which makes us one country.
Wow. That's amazing, man.
It is amazing.
Maybe we should apply it more in the world generally, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Do you guys are you guys Hindu, or do you follow Hindu values? Or?
We are born into Hindu families,
Uh-huh.
and I think I'm over time starting to appreciate Hinduism as such. But I do not think I would call myself someone who believes in Hinduism.
So you're not religious.
No.
Okay. All right.
Do you guys like eat beef and stuff like that?
Personally, Dhruva is completely vegetarian, whereas in my family, we're not supposed to eat meat, technically, by virtue of the religion itself. But then my granddad gave up on all of that. So we do still follow some of the festivals and stuff that go around, some of the rituals at home. So my mother and my grandmother still do all of the pujas at home. But a lot of the rules that were really strictly followed, we don't follow those, like especially about like food and all of that.
Yeah.
It's way more lenient back at home.
It's
a
okay.
bit like-
I eat bacon.
Yeah. I had a great shrimp dinner on Sunday evening. It was amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, we keep hearing the exchange students complaining about how the McDonald's cheeseburger doesn't seem to be right.
well, yeah. I mean, well, if it's kosher, there's not gonna be a cheeseburger, right? At all. But not everything is kosher. See, so we don't eat kosher, and just in general, if you go in Tel Aviv, then it's safe to say most restaurants in Tel Aviv aren't kosher. So they have everything.
Yeah, or they might serve food that is technically kosher, is just not being stapled as kosher. You know.
Yeah, because to be kosher, it's not just you have to have kosher food. You have to follow certain rules. You have to be closed on Saturdays. You have to have different dishes for meat, and it's very complex.
It's very complex. So
And
a lot
of course,
in Jerusalem, for example, most places will be kosher. Just because the population is more religious, there's a higher demand for kosher food. So it's not very economic for a business to not be kosher.
And Tel Aviv, which is considered the younger city, the
Secular place, the
Yeah.
young, the cool place. kind of.
So
Even though Jerusalem has some crazy good bars, man.
yeah.
Crazy good scene.
Jerusalem is a cool place to hang out for sure. But in general overview of the city, it's
Yeah, for sure. Actually, there's a myth that I heard. I mean, I don't know if it's a myth. I heard that original Indian food is actually not spicy, and because the I guess because of I don't know if it's because of the British, but through trade they would bring like chilies from Southeast Asia, and then that's how it got to India.
I think you can't. I'm sorry. I just because I think you can't really say Indian food, right? Because there's many I think maybe in the south it's more spicy, in the north it's less. I mean,
I don't know,
it's
but
very different
is there
between
something
areas.
to this
I
fact?
think it's a great question you're asking, because often we ask what is Indian food, because half of our foods did not originate in India. So tomatoes weren't Indian, potatoes weren't Indian, chilies weren't Indian. But then I think whatever we today consider Indian must have come in only around the last 150 years, 200 years.
Oh, okay.
But I can say for certain in South India,
Mm-hmm.
the region that I am from, we didn't have too much of the British influence entering our lives then, because the Britishers were mostly dealing with northern India and western India.
Okay.
What state are you?
I'm from Tamil Nadu. It's the southernmost state.
Okay.
I know Kerala in the
Yeah,
south.
it's right next to Kerala. My hometown is about 20 kilometers from the Kerala border.
Okay. I've seen a program once on Kerala. You say?
Yes, Kerala.
Kerala.
Yeah, they have like a lot of coconut there.
Yes.
Right? Known for its coconuts.
Oh,
Yes,
cool.
it's a joke in India.
Okay.
There's something I wanted to ask you about India, because I feel there's something in India that's maybe very unique to India is
Very different from what we know.
is the extremes in terms of very poor people and very rich people. So if you go in India, there's a lot of people that live in the streets, right? Children in the street, and just extreme poverty, but also very very rich people, and also some people that are right in the middle. But the extremes are very very extreme, and I'm wondering about the relationship between the populations.
So, I think I can give you a very one-sided perspective, because coming from a city, I wouldn't know what the scenario is in probably the more rural areas, although there is a decent amount of wealth in the rural areas as well. But in the cities, especially in a city like Bombay, because of the distribution of wealth across the length and breadth of the city, it can be such that, like, so if a kid, so especially like me and my brother, when we were growing up, we grew up in a Jesuit school. So the Jesuit community is a very specific Christian community that came and settled in India, and they are really well known for their educational institutions. So a lot of us, including Dhruva, went to Jesuit school. So we grew up with a very Christian tint, maybe a Christian tint or a Christian hue to our education. We used to learn their hymns, their prayer songs and all of that.
Yeah.
So when you grow up in a community like that, where, like, you're surrounded by people of an equal economic strata, it's very easy for you to ignore or like not really look at the poverty around you. So it's easy to remain in your bubble. You'll travel by car wherever you have to go, or a taxi, or like, you'll specifically spend time in all of the rich and affluent neighborhoods. Whereas I think it's only after I really stepped into design school and I was forced to, like, probably understand my city a little better, that I started stepping out into the other neighborhoods that I'd not really seen. And these neighborhoods really, like, bring out the color of the city, because there's so much that you don't know and you don't see. But it's just different. It's different aspects of the same city, and it's very easy to live your entire life in a city and not really know what your neighbor is going through, although he's living in a slum right next to the huge apartment that you're living in.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you brought up. In Mumbai, the distance between the rich and the poor is nothing. There's no space for anyone, even the rich, the poor, everyone's stuck in the same area. So I think at least all the Palestinians we had met, everyone knew of Indian film actors. So they live in, like the most famous one, Shah Rukh Khan. Right opposite his huge bungalow is a slum. Right opposite it. And that's on the beach.
So it's like it's a bit like you're living on one side of the street, you're rich.
Yes.
You're living on the other side, you're poor.
Yeah. And separated by a road, that's it.
Wow.
And further down the road, you have Taj Hotels, which is again one of the biggest hotels around.
Wow.
And that too is surrounded by slums around it.
And I was actually wondering about the social system in India, like the castes, because I mean, when I was in school, we learned about it. I remember learning about it in class briefly, but I didn't really understand how it works. So if you can just explain to people a little bit about it, and maybe say like how, like, does it still exist? Is something happening? Or
All right. I think what we have been taught about the caste system must be pretty similar to what you must have, where we were told about the system was split into 4 varnas. Varnas are colors. It means color literally.
Oh, okay.
But actually, I think it meant more quality, the quality of the person or their attributes. So the Brahmin, which is considered at the top, would be people who dealt with knowledge, the dispensing of knowledge, and politics.
And what color is that?
No, Varna was. It's not literally color, but I think it is more used to describe to speak of the quality of the person.
Okay, no,
Yes.
just because you said colors, so I
Yes.
thought, okay.
Yes, it
Yeah,
literally means color. In
All right, so the
Sanskrit.
top one is like knowledge and politics. Okay.
And then we would have just below that the Kshatriya caste, where there were kings, there would be statesmen, there would be warriors, statesmen. Yes, so they would deal with, they would go more into the administration of the town, and just below them we would have Vaishyas, who would be merchants and traders, and the lowest would be Shudras. Yes, if you go into it, there are several kinds of Shudras too, but in general, Shudras were people who have to deal with things others don't want to, such as today in Mumbai, you'd find Shudras, they've been rebranded almost into Dalits for today. That's what we call them. They have to do tasks like cleaning the sewers or taking away dead bodies, and it's considered.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a bit like workers, farmers, like let's say construction workers, for example.
Yes.
Okay, but what is it? Something that is still happening in India right now?
So I would guess the division of the society into these 4 categories happened like a very long time ago. But then again, the way culture grew around it, it became so seeped into our own everyday life that we stopped questioning as to why it happened in the first place. So each major caste has some markers or some traditions that they follow to maintain that integrity of the caste. So, for example, I can say, coming from a Brahmin family, but as Brahmins, we're supposed to go through several such rituals. So the way y'all have the bar mitzvah, is that?
Yeah.
So there is a similar thing called the munza for us, where a boy becomes a man, basically. And there are some rituals around that, and it's very specific to the Brahmin and the Kshatriya category, is that? Yeah. So, in fact, and that is one of the markers of a higher caste, in a way.
Okay.
So, so as I told you, my granddad gave up on all that, so he made sure that we don't go through that ritual, so because he doesn't want to uphold the entire idea of us having a caste, which is why it was really alien to me and my brother as well, because we weren't exposed to the caste system until it was mentioned to us by other people, and when they asked us which caste are you from, and we said we don't know.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But is it something that you ask? So,
Yeah, after we were asked this, we went home and asked, and they were like, yeah, I mean, like, we're supposed to be Brahmins, but we're not really.
Okay, but let's
But
say
then-
if you would meet like I don't know, let's say you met a girl, so you are in the top caste, right?
yeah.
Technically, and let's say you met a girl from one class below you. Like, would your parents be like, oh no, that's not really appropriate?
As of
or-
today, from the families that we're from, they
Yeah.
would not object, but there has been a lot of documentation in recent times, especially. So a lot of the recent films which have become extremely popular in my state of Maharashtra are literally talking about these issues. So the way you described it, there is a very famous movie called Sairat, where a boy from a lower caste falls in love with a girl from a higher caste.
Yeah, that's like
And-
a classic love story.
Yeah, it's the
you know?
classic
Romeo
love
and
story.
Juliet.
But then it's
Exactly.
essentially how they escape the society where they're living, but that society hunts them down at the end because they don't want this union.
That's a very
happening.
sad movie.
Yeah, it's extremely sad. I mean,
up.
it's
Yeah.
super. Yeah,
I thought it's like a happy ending, and they ran
No,
and they
no
lived
way.
happily ever after, and then everybody does this like Bollywood dance in the end, but
yeah,
no, they
but
just killed them.
it's
Okay.
literally been praised for the fact that it presents these harsh truths extremely well,
yeah.
because that is true. I mean,
Wow.
The whole idea of honor killings is somewhat from that idea itself.
Oh, okay. So that's also something that happens in India.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Because we
not
we
in the cities
know-
as much,
Mhm.
because this is more of like, so modernism changed a lot
Yeah.
for the
course.
way we deal with, or our relationship with our own culture. But then again, it helped cleanse out some of the more thoughtless acts that we used to do, where we used to just segregate society unnecessarily into so many different categories.
Yeah.
So, in fact, yeah, so this film talks about that specifically in a rural setup, where the girl and the guy, they get married and they escape from the society, but then the girl's family hunts them down because they don't want that the mark of a lower caste on one of their own.
Wow.
So it's, yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's something that it's so different to what we know, right?
Yeah. Like me and Daniel, we heard of so we've heard of honor killings because it's not, I wouldn't say it's very common, obviously, with the modernization that has been happening in Israel. Also, it affected the Arab society living here.
לא, הפוך.
But so obviously with the modernization that has been happening, it affected the Arab society living in Israel as well, the Arab minority, also the Palestinians living outside of Israel. But if you look at the statistics in Israel, if you measure, for example, the murder of women, in the Jewish population, statistically, it's about the same as, in Norway or Denmark or Germany or something like that. But in the Arab minority living in Israel, it's a lot higher.
Well, the statistics are this year there was 50, not 50. This year 50% of murders of women were from the Arabic community and 50% from the Jewish community.
Yes.
But the Arabic community is 20% of the general population in Israel. So if you look at it this way, but I've actually this specific issue was on the news this week, because of there was some demonstrations against women violence this week in Israel, and they talked about this subject a lot on the radio and stuff
actually,
like that.
I think it was I think either this week or last. I can't remember, but there was like a 3-hour strike where all the women didn't work.
That was last week, and
that
this
was last
week
week. Okay.
again. But this week there was 25 people, 25 women who was murdered this
The
year.
25th woman.
The 25th woman was murdered this week, so they're doing 25 minutes demonstration each day.
Yeah.
But that issue was in the news, and they brought up an Arabic activist against women violence, and they asked her, well, it's much more common statistically in the Arabic community. What do you think is that? And she said, and it's a very sensitive subject, but also interesting, because she said that she believes it's because the Arabic community is a weak community in terms of social economic state. So where there's a weaker population, then there's more crime and there's more violence, and which makes sense.
Yeah.
But you can also ask yourself whether is it something cultural. Well, I don't believe that violence is cultural, right?
I think.
But
that
I
you
don't
can,
know.
I
I
think
honestly
you can
don't know.
develop violence as like in a culture that you can appreciate violence more. Like we wouldn't say that, I don't know, let's say German culture, we wouldn't hold it like as a very violent culture specifically, but if let's say that the Nazis were still in control over Germany, it might have been a lot more common to use violence, because the Nazis did use violence even before the World War II, even just the rise to power. They kept having like gangs fighting in the street and stuff like that against communists, against other socialists, against so I think it's something that can be developed in a culture. I don't believe that Arabs are inherently violent, if that's what you're saying. No. I think there is something, I'm not sure what it is exactly, but the whole idea of honor killings, just this idea of like, oh, she shamed me because she did something that I disapprove of, so let's dispense with her. I don't know.
I don't think it's a common thing.
No, it's certainly not a common thing.
Arabic community, but
well,
I honestly don't know. It's so sensitive, and it's people are so different, and you can't really generalize, and families are different from one another. But statistically, it's very interesting. Why it's like that? And I truly believe that it could be because it's a weaker community, and a weaker community generally has more violence in it and crime and stuff like that. Which is sad.
We
It's sad
genuinely
that
don't
it's like
know.
that,
We
but
genuinely don't know.
generally don't know. I'm sorry, did we bore you with our
No,
discussion?
it's extremely interesting because overall, like the assumptions we run on are probably the beginning of any kind of issue that we have. So even this external viewpoint that we have on, say, the Arab community, or like, communities that we don't directly know as being part of the community itself, it's difficult to comment on their culture because we can say it's wrong coming from a more modern setup, but for them, everything that they do is right, and what we're doing is wrong in that case. So it's the same case. So when the Christian missionaries went to the smallest of islands, or like newer setups, and they told the locals that, oh look, like, the lifestyle that you're leading is completely wrong, so embrace Christianity instead. The way they saw the locals out there was, oh, these natives don't know what they're doing, so they should embrace what we think is right, which is Christianity. So maybe we're running on a very similar assumption that, oh look, we're modern, so we're right, whereas these...
Well, yeah, but you can also, like, there are certain things that I would say, like modern, like, let's say, okay, we consume a lot more than we actually need.
True.
Which might make a few people say, wait, who says that we are living in a way that is right? And Aboriginals in Australia or the Maori in New Zealand were living in a better way. But which is it's certainly possible. There are a lot more, let's say, I don't know, people are connected to nature and helping each other and things like that. It's a possibility. But no one doubts that the fact that Maoris in New Zealand practiced cannibalism is bad. Like, you don't need to be very modern to understand it's bad. You know what I mean?
I mean, then again, it's an assumption that, it was cannibalism without any reason for it. Maybe it's necessary for us to dive into the reasons behind the practice.
Well, they would go to war, and then the enemies that they would kill, they would eat them because they thought it shames the enemy that you eat him and then poop him out, basically. At least that's what I know. If there are any people from New Zealand that want to let us know more about that. But that's what I heard. But I think we can all agree, for example, that war is bad. Like, no one thinks that going to war is a good idea. But there are some cultures that believe that going to war is a good idea. It's not that they're inherently bad, but they just develop this idea. And I think it's generally like it's a bad thing. Like, Drew, you're a vegetarian, right? As you said. I don't think people can argue whether it's healthy or not healthy, whether it's moral or immoral, but no one doubts that. No one is questioning your choice of being vegetarian as being morally corrupt, let's say, right? So, I think there are certain ideas that we can all agree, just from the fact that we're all human, that they are bad. That's my belief, at least.
It's very interesting.
Thank you very much. I'm a very interesting person.
I'm so proud of you guys.
Actually, Drew, I wanted to ask Drew, like, why are you a vegetarian? Because of tradition, or is it because of health choice? Or?
I was born to a vegetarian family. And I think when I started I have tried meat earlier, fish and a lot of chicken, beef, but I think I was just not able to eat it. I was not able to enjoy the food, and I was also, something within me felt disgusted. So I think I stepped away from it. So I'm still having a tough time having egg today, but I think I'm starting to get used to it, because Israel, I'm not able to get too many vegetarian options for protein.
Really?
Yep.
It's interesting.
Okay.
Because I thought that Israel is quite vegetarian, or Middle Eastern, and just Mediterranean food is.
I think price also plays a huge role in
price.
Eggs are relatively cheap, and
You feel like Israel is probably very expensive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Israel's an expensive
If we start
country.
counting everything we are paying in rupees, I think we'd stop eating.
Wow.
Because
but there are a lot of vegetarian choices in Israel, right?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, which was nice actually to see. I saw vegan sushi bar, which I plan to visit soon.
Oh, nice. I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite thing about Israel, and what's your least favorite thing about Israel so far? from
I
your
think
experience?
my favorite is hummus, and Samarth's least favorite is hummus.
A very common answer.
You don't
very,
like
very
it?
common answer.
I'm pretty much sick of it, honestly.
Damn. Sick of it.
Yeah.
No,
I
but
think
on a more serious note, I guess the best thing about Israel, I mean, at least Tel Aviv so far, has been the public spaces. So the attitude towards public spaces is beautiful out here, as compared to India, especially. Firstly, like when we went to the promenade, we just saw the entire effort that they've taken to connect all of the beaches.
Yes.
So it makes it much more accessible for everyone. Secondly, the engagement factor to to the promenade itself. So you've got like the public gyms and you've got places for children to play, and the sensitivity to that place or that public area itself. So we also noticed these small cones that they kept everywhere, so that in case you go and smoke at the beach, you can keep this as an ashtray next to you. So I think it's my favorite part is the fact that every aspect of a public space is really well thought out here, and it's extremely accessible to anyone, everyone who
It's
comes there.
so interesting and weird you say that because, well, Israel it's not a planned place. Maybe Tel Aviv a bit more than others because the management of the city in Tel Aviv is good and it has a lot of money and they know how to work. They're a good. It's a good. Um, it's managed well, Tel Aviv, compared to other cities. But in general, Israel and some parts of Tel Aviv as well are very much not planned. So things were built, let's say, in the 70s, and they didn't think that now, 40 years later, the population would be at a certain size, or it's gonna be like so. A lot of, let's say, compared to Europe, for example, a lot of the public spaces are. Not all of them, like you mentioned. The promenade in Tel Aviv is new and a lot of new places, but there's the other places, especially outside of Tel Aviv, are not so thought out.
I
But
think
it's interesting you say that. I guess maybe compared to India, I guess maybe compared to I don't know, but if we compare to Europe, then no.
Yeah, I don't think we can comment on that. We haven't been to Europe yet, but so far I think Tel Aviv is probably the epitome of public spaces that we've experienced so far.
There's also the thing about well, we talked about this on our last podcast, but how people are in Israel in public, where they're not always so kind, they're not always so polite, they're not. Do you feel that?
A little initially. I mean, it's not like they weren't kind or not polite. It's just there wasn't any curiosity towards us in any way. So I mean, not like it bothered us, but we had instances where some of the older people would stare us down. Like they would literally glare at us and like demanding like, where are you, like, what gave you the right to be here?
Really?
It was really strange.
What gave
but
you
then
the right? A passport
Yeah.
and money. And it
literally.
came.
But then I think it was also because we were facing a bit of that loneliness factor with the whole strikes going on. Like we were literally surrounded
Yeah.
just by exchange students, and we hadn't really spoken to any of the locals here. But after the strikes were called off, it just became much easier to be around because then we got talking with like a lot of our classmates.
Mhm.
So then that made it easier because
Yeah.
what was very interesting was the people who had earlier been here and spoken to us were girls, and they had a very different experience of Israel as compared to us, where they spoke of, oh, the people are amazing, they come and talk to you whenever you want, and sometimes I'll have to ask them to leave because I'm busy. But for us, it has been pretty different, where we have had to approach people mostly, and yes, usually once you start speaking to them, they are amazing people to know, but on the surface, people here are a little more tough to approach than,
Wow.
say, India.
Yeah.
It's
I
so
mean-
different than what Tanya told us last week, right?
Yeah, I guess when you come from India and when you come from Denmark, you have very different experiences.
It's
generally
insane because
so
she's also a girl and she's tall and she's pretty, right?
she's
so-
she's very good looking, I would say.
So maybe
But
she
I'm biased,
gets
she's my
approached more because she told us last week that she feels like it's very easy to talk to people here. Like people are very approachable, which is the opposite of what you say. And it's obviously compared to Denmark where people are colder and they're more. But she mentioned that people are more approachable, but they're also they don't always think about people around them. they don't always pay attention to people around them in terms of being polite and being thoughtful in a public space and stuff like that on the road and lines. But so it's very interesting to see the difference of perspective.
I think a large part of it is because we're from India, and if foreigners do come to India, then people in India are far more inquisitive, and they approach the foreigners very openly and have conversation. But over here, it took us, I think, about a month and a half into the course before we got to speak to Israeli students.
Wow.
I think it's because also, well, I know that in our school there's always exchange students, a lot from India as well. So it's not uncommon to see.
Yeah, also because there are so many foreigners here. So
Yeah,
I think that
as well.
novelty factor is lost. But in India, foreigners usually, wow, oh, there's someone up from outside, let's go and talk to them.
Yeah, I remember they wanted to take pictures with me in a place in
Well,
Delhi.
you're a very
Yes,
handsome man.
it's
In the
possible.
place with Delhi, they wanted to take pictures with me, and they would come like 5 or 6 kids like to take a picture with me, and
Yeah, your novelty factor there.
yeah, I guess. But like you mentioned, there's a lot of also in the street, not just in our school, but there's also in the street. There's a lot of people, well, from India and from Africa and from like non-white people, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned that when you came here, the first place you came to was Levinsky, right? It's
Yeah,
like
true. We stayed in Levinsky for the first month that we were here.
and it's like so.
Just
It's like
explain maybe to people what is Levinsky.
yeah, it's a southern part of Tel Aviv that has a lot of well, you can we'll say refugees from like African refugees from Sudan,
Refugees,
and Eritrea.
also just regular work immigrants that come here, not just from Africa specifically, even.
Yeah,
know?
there are a lot of Koreans and Indians. I saw a Chinese restaurant too over there.
Yeah, and but there's a really nice market there also.
Yeah, real nice market.
And,
So I was wondering, what was your impressions when you came to a place like Levinsky on your first days?
Yeah, I think the first, a first view of Tel Aviv itself was Levinsky, for that matter. The place where we were staying was an Airbnb, so the host literally told us that, okay, so south of here, you're going to find Allenby and Rothschild. Is that how you...
South?
north, I
North.
think north.
No,
Rothschild-
the boulevard? Yeah, Rothschild, right? That's how... Is that how you say it? Rothschild, right? Yeah.
Rothschild, yeah.
So he said, yeah, you'll find all of these places and they're really nice to see, but like a little further up the street, you're going to have the central bus station.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't go there at night because it's not that great a neighborhood.
Yeah.
We were a little curious as to what this whole deal with the central bus station is. So we ended up stepping out at night, and it was really interesting because the road that we were staying on, at one end of the street, you had one grocery store, which was closer to Allenby, and things were quite expensive out there. On the other side of the road, there was another grocery store which was closer to Levinsky Park, and things were super cheap out there, extremely affordable. So we were literally living in the middle of this divide between, say, Allenby and Levinsky. And yeah, it was such a mix of cultures, because later on when we went towards Allenby and the rest of, like, as you would call the white city of Tel Aviv, it was a very different...
I'm sorry to cut you, but I just want to explain. It's called the White City not because of the people, not because
True,
of the people
yeah.
are white. It's called the White City because of the buildings. The
Yeah,
buildings
which
are
is
white.
Apparently Bauhaus.
Yeah. Bauhaus. It's
It's a
German
1920s German
architecture
style.
style.
Yeah, exactly.
That brought here by Jewish immigrants from Germany, and now Tel Aviv is World Heritage Site because it's one of the biggest concentrations
Bauhaus,
of
right?
of Bauhaus, of that
Yeah.
certain architectural style, and it's called the White City by the UN, which is the official name of the World.
Not because
Heritage
people are
Site.
extremely pale. In Tel
Not
Aviv.
because people are white.
Okay.
No. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, in fact, it's very interesting because currently I'm working on a project which deals with this idea of the White City itself. So I'm reading this book called White City, Black City by Sharon Rothbard. He's an architect who's also a professor in Betzalel. In fact, he argues against this whole notion of the White City, saying that it's a complete sham because apparently the Bauhaus style, there was never necessarily a Bauhaus style because the people from the Bauhaus were told specifically that you don't brand this as a Bauhaus style, whereas the buildings in Tel Aviv, none of them have been created by Bauhaus architects.
Really?
Yeah. So although there were immigrants from Dessau or Bauhaus itself who came to Israel, two of them worked up in Haifa. One of them worked in Tel Aviv, but around the kibbutz. But none of them came to the White City to make any of the buildings there.
So who made those buildings? Who designed?
They
those
were
buildings?
people who were influenced by the Bauhaus, and then
Oh.
later on, it was branded as a Bauhaus style, and it's literally the only place, as of now, which proclaims itself to have a Bauhaus style. Because, I mean, think about it, like, there should have been several more places around the world, because if Bauhaus was such an influence...
I've seen it in Frankfurt. It's not pretty common, but some buildings in Frankfurt, you can definitely see the resemblance to buildings in Tel Aviv.
True, yeah.
And I've been to a museum there, an architectural museum there, which also talks about that. But it's not very common. You're right. It's not very common.
Yeah.
Mostly in Germany, I think. I don't think it's you go around Europe, I don't think you see many Bauhaus buildings.
The thing is that it was created in the 1920s, but by the 30s, the Nazis were already in power, and they were forbidding a lot of these things from being created.
They closed the
Bauhaus Center.
Yeah, they closed
like a lot of different
school.
art programs that they had.
Yeah.
You know, they only approved certain kind of buildings, certain kind of art, certain kind of books, these kind of things.
Yes.
So.
I think what I meant was that Bauhaus is definitely a very influential style even today, but it was never branded as a Bauhaus style. The branding itself is what was wrong in the White City. That's what the author of the book
well, you know, we want some recognition.
Yeah.
True, yeah. And it did help a lot because it did get a spotlight onto Tel Aviv.
Yes,
but that was also in response to the movement away from Jaffa. So that is what the entire book is about, the whole White City, Black City divide. He calls the Black City of Tel Aviv as Jaffa and the areas around. I think even he refers to Neve Sha'anan, which is where Levinsky is, also as part of the Black City.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say Jaffa. Like, I don't know this term Black City. Like, there are some neighborhoods where there are a lot of refugees or immigrants living.
I don't
there
think
are
they
also
talk about,
places.
he means like black
Yeah,
people.
not by the color.
No, but I meant like but Jaffa, for example, there's some areas in Jaffa that are like super fancy.
Recently.
Yeah, gentrification.
That's true.
Recently.
Yeah. What originally was Jaffa was literally changed to and appropriated to what Tel Aviv wanted of Jaffa. The original Jaffa doesn't really exist anymore. Or what the port city of Jaffa was, most of the buildings have been erased.
As a port city, perhaps, but there's still a lot of old original buildings in Jaffa.
Yeah. Also, a lot of people who are you know, like they have been living there for a while already. It's just that Jaffa wasn't. There are certain areas in Yafo that are like you know, wealthier, but generally I would say that the main wealth into Jaffa comes from basically the Jewish population that came here and then, you know, built around it and in it and more and more and more, and so it improved. I mean, from what I know, maybe I'm wrong.
And even a lot of artists who've set up their studios around Jaffa, I think that also increases its overall appeal
For sure.
in a way.
Of course, there's the market there, which has a lot of bars and restaurants and stuff, and
All right. So wait, you guys mentioned that you have like 2.5 more months to be in Israel.
Yeah, just around, but it depends on when our semester ends, considering that we had the strikes going on
there were strikes
for
at
the first
beginning.
couple of weeks. But yeah, I think we should be done with the semester somewhere around midway through Jan, and then we have another month to travel around Israel.
You're gonna travel only in Israel, or you're going to other places as well?
We might go see Jordan, Egypt if possible,
What
but
about Europe, man? Come on, it's a golden opportunity. Go to like Amsterdam or something.
I mean it means money as well. So
Yeah, and they're
Money.
already in the Middle Eastern experience, you know.
Yeah,
They want some camels, they want some desert.
yeah, loads of camels, please. Yeah.
Did you go to other places in Israel? Did you go to like the desert or the north or?
No, so we went to Bethlehem
Yeah.
and we went down to Hebron,
Yeah.
but that's about it. And we've seen Jerusalem, but we really have to see the
Should-
desert.
Definitely go to the desert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it last podcast about some people who hate the desert, like you. Some people
Yeah,
who love
I-
the desert,
I-
like me.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I think it's the most
I want the
beautiful.
north, especially now that it's winter. So in Israel, like when it's winter, it's really green all
Yeah,
over.
yeah.
You know,
In the north.
and in the north, it's
Golan.
very, very green.
The Golan Heights.
the Galil, the
Beautiful.
Carmel near Haifa, the mountains,
yeah.
beautiful. But in the summer, obviously, it's hot, so it gets a bit yellow, and you know. But yeah,
The mountains.
the yeah, it's
Yeah.
not. It's you know, hills.
Yeah, Golan
no,
would
it's
be
fine.
really interesting to see.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's you can go to there's actually a place I would recommend. I recommend this to everybody that comes to Israel. So there was a UN Secretary General, and his name was Kofi Annan.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's a mountain in the Golan, and there's a cafe there. So Kofi is coffee, and Anan means cloud in Hebrew. So it's like coffee in a cloud. It's called Kofi Annan. That's the name of the place, and it's right next to an old Israeli bunker that is now being used by the UN to look over Syria. And you can actually go there, meet the UN soldiers, talk to them a little bit.
Wow.
It's really
Okay.
fun, man. It's really fun.
It's so weird you mentioned
yeah.
it. I've been there like ages ago. I
Yeah.
didn't know you know it.
And I met, when I was there last time, I met a guy from Estonia. One of the soldiers was from Estonia, and which, by the way, used to be part of Denmark. I didn't know it, but it used to be part of Denmark. And a girl from New Zealand. And I saw, they have the flag on the side of their uniform, but I just barely saw it. So I was like, "Oh, where are you from? Australia?" And she looks at me like offended. She's like, "No, I'm from New Zealand." And I was like, "Oh, sorry, my bad."
New Zealand, mate.
New Zealand. I don't even know if that was a New Zealand accent. All right, guys. Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having
Yeah, it was a
us.
pleasure to
Yeah.
having you. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting episode.
It was
I felt.
very, very interesting.
Yeah, and thanks for coming. And well, if you're here for another 2 months, then of course I'll see you around school.
Oh yeah,
And maybe
sure.
we
Yeah.
can do something again for sure.
Yeah, get some hummus.
Definitely.
The Israel Trail.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you very much.
Thank you for
Shabbat shalom,
listening.
everybody. Take care.
Have another good week, and we'll see you next time.
Yalla, bye.
Bye bye.